prove something to either a parent or a mentor. So again, that's an external pressure.
If you take realistic targets, you're consigning yourself to walk the path of mediocrity. And we don't want mediocrity. We want to get the best versions of ourselves in the leadership and the organization. That's why the game, the impossible, is set. That's why the roadmap, the targets cannot be watered down. Either we execute or we get executed. We have no choice. So the word pregnancy, by the way, when I use this term, and I talk to so many African leaders in many, many countries in Africa, they love the word pregnancy. And because they said...
Why Africa in particular?
I mean, for them...
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon. This is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father-son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, and faith. Today, we are continuing our 8-part series on the Big Fast Results 8 Steps methodology. And so far, in the last 3 episodes, we have covered the first step, which is setting the strategic direction through a strategic direction workshop. In step 2, we talked about the importance of running labs. How do you turn these things into granular action plans? And then in last week's episode, part 3, we talked about open days, why it's important to ensure that we garner feedback in a constructive and structured manner. Which brings us to this week's episode where we talk about step 4. Step 4 is about publishing a roadmap. Why do we believe in this practice?
Publishing a roadmap does 2 things. The most important part of publishing the roadmap is that because you publish it and you make it public, it means you have now become completely pregnant. That means the organization and the leaders, they have no choice but to deliver because they've told everybody in no uncertain terms what the targets are, what they have to deliver. So the roadmap, number 1, fulfills that criteria that you have made the leaders in the organization and the whole people in the organization are completely pregnant, they're accountable to deliver the results. Second reason why the roadmap is important for it to be published is that it provides a common ground so that everybody in the organization can understand exactly why and what and how things are going to be done. Because if you want to operate as a team, if people have a different interpretation about what it is they're supposed to do and they don't see the connection, they're not fully aligned. So secondly, as I said, the second reason for the roadmap to be published is so that everybody in the organization, from top to bottom, they all know exactly the hymn sheet. They can sing together and they know exactly what they need to do. Those are 2 reasons why it's important to publish it.
Allowing people to be very aligned on what is required means that your roadmap needs to be very concrete and very robust. What makes a concrete roadmap?
A concrete roadmap must put in the clear target by whom and when it is going to be delivered and who's going to benefit from it. For example, if we say we're going to build an MRT in the roadmap, then you say by this particular year, line 1 for MRT will be finished. And then you should say the total ridership, the numbers of people that we expect to use the MRT will be X numbers. And that's why you're putting it that way. And then you should say it will cost the government this amount of money and we will commit that amount of money to do it. And so that means there must be things that the government is going to do to raise enough taxes or to bring enough revenue to make sure that the funding is required to make that happen. So the more concrete the promises there are in the roadmap, the better it is. The other one was when we were handling low-income household, we had in the list the government had all the list of people that needed to be helped because they were in the miskin tegah, that means hardcore poor. So the roadmap is concrete, to your point, Leon. When you say things like this, next year, 34,000 people on our list in the hardcore poor will move out from poverty. And then, by the way, you can say, we know exactly who they are, the families that are in that, the 34,000. So then you have no choice that you have to do that. On the road system that we were doing a lot of work on rural infrastructure. The roadmap also said clearly where are the rural roads that will be built, from which village to another village. And then you say how many people will benefit from it, the types of road that will be built, how many bridges will be built. The more concrete the roadmap it is, the better it is, because you then become completely pregnant.
What do you think are some of the reasons why, you gave the example of government, but, as well as governments, why do you think maybe even businesses might be a bit hesitant to be quite as transparent? Because I think this goes beyond just if we're talking about it from a corporate perspective, then this is not an
Yeah.
annual report.
Yeah.
This is essentially putting out all of your more, let's say, operational plans and working plans and KPIs, making that very public as well.
Yes.
Why don't more people do that?
A lot of people do it, but what they do, Leon, when they do it, they water down the targets. They don't follow the original game of the impossible. So they keep the impossible target in their back pocket, but they come up with a target that is realistic. That's the one they want to be measured by. But very few people commit the game of the impossible targets in the roadmap, to your point. And the reason is the fear of failure. And I can tell you, when I was in Malaysia Airlines, when I was in Shell, there was a lot of resistance from the people in my team for us to commit those really ambitious targets in the roadmap. But I basically told them, this is the journey that we have decided to take, and we are going to be held accountable for those tough targets. And I want to get the best out, the best versions of ourselves to do it. When we introduced the National Transformation Program, both the government transformation program and the economic transformation program, let me make a confession here. I remember I had a very good discussion with the Prime Minister. The roadmap is very thick. And if I recall, the ETP roadmap came up to more than nearly 500 pages with lots of details. And he told me, why don't we circulate this document to all the ministers so that they come out with their comments before we go publish? I said, sir, no. I strongly recommend we do not do that. He asked me, why is it you don't want to circulate it? Because I can guarantee you, if we circulate this, they will water down the targets. Because they are so fearful of putting those tough targets and be held accountable. So I'd suggest, in a context of situational leadership, which we covered in one of the earlier episodes, you must hold a directive approach in leadership at the start of the journey. That means do not send out this draft document to the ministers because they water it down. You and I read this chapter by chapter. When you and I agree with what is going to be put out there, we will issue it. Because the content of what is there has already been agreed by everyone in the cabinet. But publishing it, commitment is the one that was a problem. And so he looked at me, are you sure this is the right approach? I'm very sure. I'm very sure. To be clear, let me now make a public declaration that the National Transformation Program, both the Government Transformation Program and the Economic Transformation Program, the draft document was not circulated for comments amongst the ministers because we did not want them to water down the targets. We wanted them to be published as is in a pure, concrete sense. After all, we've already announced publicly during the open day in the booth, this was what we're going to do. They agreed with that too. But publishing in the document is a very tough thing because most people don't want to put in a document so concrete and so plainly and clearly, and they want to water it down. So the key here is that in leadership, under situational leadership, that's why I mentioned before, you have to take a directive approach in the starting part of the journey, and in the context of the roadmap, make sure you do exactly that. You don't allow people to water it down. Because if you water it down, as I said before earlier on, if you take realistic targets you're consigning yourself to walk the path of mediocrity. And we don't want mediocrity. We want to get the best versions of ourselves in the leadership and the organization. That's why the game, the impossible, is set. That's why the roadmap, the targets cannot be watered down.
What were some of the implications of that or positive outcomes of doing that?
The positive outcomes of doing it is that once we publish it, then everybody look at one another in the cabinet. I remember clearly after we launched the open day, and we televised this, by the way. The roadmap was not only just published, but we televised it. And the Prime Minister went on television and announced it on television and invited the ministers one by one on stage. So they all said, look, we are collectively and severally pregnant. We have now a choice. I remember the Prime Minister said to everybody, either we execute or we get executed. We have no choice. So the word pregnancy, by the way, when I use this term, and I talk to so many African leaders in many, many countries in Africa, they love the word pregnancy. And because they said...
Why Africa in particular?
I mean, for them, it's so, the imagery is, for them, is so real. And so they say, you know, Mr. Jala, we really love that because many of us in Africa, we make promises in our election campaign, but we know damn well we're not going to implement them. But when you tell us we make them, we publish them and put them in the roadmap, we become wholly pregnant, meaning to say that when a pregnant woman is in that state, 9 months you have to deliver. You have no choice, but you have to deliver. So they just love it. They absolutely love it.
I suppose also because if you look at it from a slightly more philosophical standpoint, then when you're pregnant with something, that implies that what you are going to deliver is something that lives, something that lives, and that something that eventually thrives.
Absolutely.
So back actually to your point about, I think it was 2 episodes ago, where you were explaining in your sort of teaching that you do with Harvard, that they talk about their version of a true north is what they call a legacy goal. And actually that implies maybe a degree of legacy as well, because you are pregnant with this thing, this initiative, whether it's for your government or business, and then you deliver it and that thing lives. And the idea is then for that thing to thrive and to begin to impact, the ecosystem that it enters into.
Good point, Leon. Absolutely. I mentioned right at the start of our discussion, there are 2 reasons why the roadmap need to be published in the way we do it. One was to make sure there's commitment to deliver. The other one is alignment amongst everybody. To your point about legacy goals, because you have announced it publicly, it's not just the leader that's going to do it. The collective organization is involved in implementing this because the roadmap is detailed. The relevant departments, the relevant ministry, all the civil servants have to deliver. They are severally pregnant as well throughout the organization. So because of that, when the leader leaves, it doesn't die with the person that leaves because it continues with the successor because the whole organization, the commitment to deliver is already there. This is very important. And one very important aspect of government I notice is this. You notice Malaysia produced so many 5-year plans. Every year we put up a 5-year plan, another 5-year plan. You notice there is no chapter in the 5-year plan that talks about the exact amount of budgets required to execute the plan. And by the way, Malaysia is not alone in this problem. All the other countries I've seen that produce 5-year plans, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the rest of Asia, they produce 5-year plans without budgets. And this is the biggest problem because without budget, how do you implement it?
Right.
And so when you have a roadmap, you must make sure all the resources that is required are committed as well, including the money. That is why when you look at the National Transformation Program, whether the GTP or the ETP, I can tell you very clearly, there are clear declaration of budgets against every single one of those initiatives. And that is a very important departure from how 5-year plans are being done globally. And so very, very important. And so If you don't do that, I believe roadmaps without a budget is a draft. President Kikwete from Tanzania, when I said this to him, he laughed. He said, that's the best quotation I have heard from you, Idris. When I told him, a roadmap without a budget is a draft. Thou shalt never publish a draft. And so I said, you will only publish a roadmap when the roadmap has budgets. And therefore, there is the guarantee that it will continue to be implemented even after the leader leaves. To your point, the legacy will continue.
Having said that, one of the things that we believe firmly in and that we practice is recursive problem solving, and with that means that we generally take an iterative approach to anything that we do, to accommodate changes in political or economic landscape, or even just business environment if you are in business. With that in mind, then how do you make adjustments, let's say, to those sorts of shifts when you have published a very finalized roadmap? I suppose the short question is, what are the parameters that you can play around with? Can you tweak certain parameters on the roadmap?
Yeah, there are two things there, Leon. To your point, can you tweak? Yes, you can tweak. But what you don't tweak is the true north.
The goals,
the big goals, the goalpost does not change. But the way in which you go about doing it, and I said under one of our earlier episode, I did mention that there are the one-third, and one-third rule.
Yes.
One-third of the things recommended in the labs, one-third of the activities recommended in the roadmap will be implemented exactly as published in the roadmap. Another third, what is published in the roadmap, will be changed and refined. They will be the same activity, but they will be refined and changed based on circumstances. There's one-third that's entirely new. And the reason for the A, B, and C is to make sure that the true north targets are achieved. You make modifications because circumstances change, competition change, the landscape change, the consumer attitude and behavior change along the way. And therefore, you must be agile enough to make the adaptation. And so problem solving that you mentioned before is critical. You will know on a weekly basis when you do problem solving. Problem solving is simply a tool to address the fact that the original things that you are going to do cannot be achieved in that week. And if you fail, you must make adaptations. So the routine of problem solving is a very important component of transformation. Yeah. And leaders who are not involved in problem solving, they cannot then carry the tag of being leader.
If we were to use, because let's say the example you gave was about a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So we've determined now that we can make certain changes to how we achieve the goals or whatever the objective is that we want to achieve. The question is, let's take, for example, you are a company and you want to do $2 billion in revenue. And so in your roadmap, to your teams, or maybe even to your investors, potentially even your end users, you announce that goal, and you say that in the next, let's say, 2 years, we want to be valued at $2 billion US dollars. You said that we can change the how as long as we don't change the true north.
True north.
So if we were to say we still want to do 2 billion, but maybe instead of 2 years, it's 3 years. Does that count as shifting the goalpost? 3 years to accommodate some sort of change or shift in business environment? Or would it mean that we make tweaks as long as we are still operating within that quantum and within that same time period?
What you try to keep the organization robustly on is to keep the target, no change, and also keep the duration. Don't make any changes in duration, but the how to achieve it may change.
Yes.
So if you have 10 initiatives that are lined up there, of the 10 initiatives, you realize that 3 of the initiatives are not going to meet it, you have to remove those 3 initiatives and refine them and change them. You come with an entirely new initiative to crush the lead time, to make sure you achieve it within the timeline. So you must hold up the team accountable to the original target and the timeline. And I know it's uncomfortable, Leon. This is very, very uncomfortable. I've been CEOs, managing directors of many companies in my corporate life, I know the most difficult challenge during the one-to-one staff appraisal with my direct reports was them wanting to water down the target, them wanting to change the true north, them wanting to extend the timeline. But then I realized this, and I mentioned before, human beings are at the best when their back's against the wall. I realized that you are uncompromising with the true north targets as well as the timeline given. Somehow or other, people are so ingenious, they will find ways around it. Time and again, I found that people rise to the occasions when you tell them, but I can assure you it's very uncomfortable.
What do you think informs that deep-rooted desire to perform under pressure?
I suppose it is the idea of wanting to go for broke. Really, I recall the first time I studied abroad was I won a Japan Airlines scholarship to represent USM. At that time, there were 5 students. It was 1980. They selected 6 students from Malaysia, 6 from Guam, 6 from Hawaii, 6 from Philippines, and 6 from Thailand, 6 from Indonesia, 6 from Singapore, and 6 from Guam. And we spent 3 months at Sophia University. And there was 3 months of a student exchange program. And we studied Japanese management and international business in Asia. That was a subject. And I told myself in a quiet corner of my room, this is my first exposure to a really international class. I want to be the top of the class. I didn't publish it in the roadmap. I really made myself pregnant. So I had to really stick very closely to the top students in the class. This is my first exposure. I can tell you, Leon, by the time we came out there, I was the top of that class. And I scored both subjects. I scored 98 and 97 marks out of it, almost full marks for the subject. But the key here was when you say that in 3 months' time, which is no change, the exam is coming, I cannot postpone that, and I want to come out top in that class. And the reason why I wanted to do that, I realized this was my first real exposure to an international competition. I studied in Barrio, I studied in Marudi, and I went to USM, and that's still within the Jago Kampung approach. But my first exposure to the international world was then. I was a relatively young boy at the time. And when I came out from that, you know what it gave to me, Leon? It gave to me huge confidence, personal confidence that if you go for broke, you put your back against the wall, you can get there. And I remember the key word from my dad, Tama, he said, because he was a teacher, the word kiasu katui in Kalabit means, burning desire to win. Find out who is the best in class, be his or her best friend, do exactly what they do, but to the power of 10. But in this particular case, there was just not one person that was good. There were many, many good people in that. So I became friends with almost everybody in the team. And we had 3 months of crash course in Sophia University. It was a fantastic experience.
I suppose there's also actually a theological aspect to that. You were saying that we want to go for broke, which means that sometimes the performance is, that there's a relationship between performance and pressure. And usually pressure is more often than not, actually, it's externally, it's influenced externally. We feel a certain pressure to be better than the other person, so that's external. Or we feel a pressure to, to maybe prove something to either a parent or a mentor. So again, that's an external pressure. And so that as you were talking, I was just wondering, why are we so drawn to this? And I wonder if maybe the deeper reason to it is in the fact that as human beings, we are relational beings because we are created by a relational God. As Christians, we believe in a triune God. So God as Father, God as Son, God as Holy Spirit, which is inherently relational. So before we were even created, that was, if you like, the model of relationship. So naturally, if we are made in God's image, Therefore, we are made to be able to be in community. And so I think the fact that we are so drawn to share things with others, but then by that same virtue, drawn to perform when we are held accountable to other people, is because actually we are supposed to thrive within the context of community, which is why we require, whether it's a level of competition with someone else or encouragement. Those are the things that often drive high performers. If you look at sport, there's not a single high-performing professional athlete that does all of his or her training completely devoid of any support from either a coach or other teammates. Even high-level tennis players, they train among other rivals as well in the same discipline. And so I believe that there really is a need for us to, in whatever our discipline is, to find, where are there pockets to do the ketui thing, or I think on a wider scale, how do we find areas to find community in whatever the pursuit is, whether it's in business, whether it's in health and fitness, or whether it's in your faith as well. I think especially in the area of church, we've been asking the question, especially in the last few years with the advent of online church. Is there even really a need for people to come and gather physically in physical spaces anymore? Because you have so much more reach now online. But I think we always return to the fact that while it's great to have these tools to be able to push the gospel far and wide, if we were to do that over an extended period of time, devoid of community and meeting face to face, you actually lose out on, I think, a very important aspect of the faith, which is not just about the knowledge of God, but actually the experience of God. And sometimes God speaks to us or shows himself through other people. And so the more we remove ourselves from community, actually the less opportunities we have to be able to see God at work in the other person. And so the more we have a habit of gathering together, it's in the Bible as well. It says, do not stop gathering. For as more people are gathered in my name, there I am too. The more we can begin to see God at work. And back to that point on creating something that is delivering something that is living and something that thrives, that is where we start to see very healthy communities, healthy churches that go on to make an impact in the societies that they are in.
Let me pick on the points you mentioned about the spiritual side of it. I think, in my view, Leon, when Jesus came to the earth, there are two good news. The most important good news in my mind, people can debate with me. The first one was when he said he came to die to save us, salvation. The second one was when he said, when I die, I'm going to leave behind. I will send you the Holy Spirit to live within you. So the idea of going for broke was, if you set the game the impossible, you publish it in the roadmap. You become completely pregnant. If you are a Christian, you really believe in the second part of the good news, that God sent the Holy Spirit to live within us. Now, if you really believe that is the case, then the immense power of God that lives within us need to exhibit itself and manifest itself through divine intervention for things to be done and delivered. And that's why I really honestly believe the sixth secret of transformational leadership has to have a place called divine intervention. And because this trick us to the second point when Jesus said, when I leave, when I die, I will send the Holy Spirit to live within you. And that, I think, is a very, very important component to the things that we do. Now, I want to pick the second point. Why do we need to attend church? Because you realize if we're solo or running solo as human beings, we go through ups and downs. There are days when you feel triumphant about the things you're doing. There are days when you feel completely down. But if you meet regularly with other people, your downs may be happening at a time when someone else is having an up. When you meet with someone that has been up for that week, they're feeling really great about it, you become encouraged. So in a journey of a congregation of people, a team of people, there are different phases that people go through mentally and physically in life. And so when you meet people, you become encouraged by other people who talk about positive stuff when you are down. So if you are continuously solo and running alone by yourself in a tough journey, you find yourself very, very difficult to come out from the valley of despair. But if you are meeting other people in the congregation, they happen to be right on top of the mountain in their journey and they talk about it, you become totally encouraged. So I do believe that this idea of coming together physically to exchange views and to encourage one another, that's how you can get, I call it conflagration. That means you have individual bushfires, but if you connect the bushfires within ourselves, and then the bushfires become a huge conflagration. And that's how it can burn a whole forest. And so, and I do really believe the importance of doing that. And the idea of leadership is this. Leaders are people in a congregation that bring hope to others. And in the context of the jungle, leadership in a jungle is a person that says to people, come with me. I bring you to the clearing. Because people don't like the dense jungle, tropical jungle. There is the clearing. Come with me and let's stand in the clearing. And that's what a leader does because it brings hope, the dense hope or despair within this very engulfing tropical jungle that can be so intimidating for some people. But the leader stands out there and tell everybody, come with me. There is this clearing. We can come there and congregate in that clearing. So I do believe the leadership must bring hope. And just like the idea of bringing people out from the dense, engulfing tropical jungle into the clearing so that then there is hope. So this idea of bringing people together is a very important part.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum it up because, as much as we want to hold people accountable, the practice of doing a roadmap is not solely to instill fear in people. It is to do a little bit of that. But ultimately, we want to do that through the lens of actually creating hope for them, hope to look forward to achieving that true north when we finally get there. I think that's a great place to end this week's episode. What can we look forward to in the next step after publishing a roadmap? What comes next?
The next episode is because we have become completely pregnant, you now want to make sure that everybody within the organization will now become completely pregnant as well. And that's why the next episode will cover key performance indicators, how you cascade key performance indicators throughout the organization so that not only the top leaders become pregnant, but the whole organization become pregnant through instituting clear key performance indicators on an annual basis. And that's what we'll cover in the next episode.
Looking forward to that. Thank you all so much for joining us on yet another episode of The Game of Impossible. Thank you for supporting us, whether you watch online, whether you listen on Spotify. And we just want to encourage you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, on our social media platforms as well, on both IG and TikTok. It really makes a difference to us as we continue to grow in this space, as we continue to also develop in ourselves, but also obviously in our gear and just providing the best quality content for you. So please do subscribe. It really helps us. And we look forward to bringing you so much more content in the, I wouldn't say weeks to come, but we are committed, very much pregnant to deliver this podcast. So let's say in the years to come. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.